Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm your new host with a twist, Space Ghost 06. Spooky season's around the corner. It's one of my favorite times of the year with all the sweets, scares, and interesting costumes people wear. But one of my favorite things about the Halloween season is the scary movies that come out around the time of year. So today, I'm going to yap about one of the biggest movies set to release this month, The Black Phone. Hello? But I wanted to talk about... Are you sure? There's nothing you can do. $20? Alright, fine, I'll do it. Okay, so it's come to my attention that another highly anticipated movie that was going to come out this month, but was moved to December, was none other than Five Nights at Freddy's 2. With the hype on the rise and being the youngest channel ever, I'd like to look back on the games that started it all. You see, as large and as popular Five Nights at Freddy's has become in the past 11 years since the release of the first game, fans have had a hard time trying to put together all the pieces laid out to solve the greatest mystery in the series. And with each game, book, movie that comes out to compound onto the totally stable timeline, I get the feeling Five Nights at Freddy's fans tend to get completely lost in the sauce to make sense of the big picture Scott Cawthon was cooking up. And being an absolute casual to the series and watching dozens of theory videos from various creators, today I'm determined to solve the puzzle while giving a retrospective review on each installment. Before we begin this great endeavor, we're going to lay out a few ground rules to distinguish this video or series from the rest. Rule number 1, we're sticking to the release order. I'd like to take the approach of discussing each installment in the time frame it came out, mainly to understand the intentions and decisions Scott Cawthon came to at the time he developed and released each of these games. This would include some of the game mechanics, lore, and other creative decisions. Rule number 2, we're reviewing the games made by Scott Cawthon only. This one may be a bit controversial for some, but I'd like to give the games a bit more of a presence in the series. While Scott has come out to state that the books are non-canon, but share elements from the sacred timeline, I get the feeling the books tend to blur the details in solving the series. The same goes for the movies. Even though I'd like to talk about them, I may do a future video talking about the shared elements from the games, but since the film series is ongoing and non-canon, I'm going to omit them from my retrospective series. Also, I won't be discussing anything developed by Steel Wolf Studios, since a lot of creative decisions from Scott were not properly implemented into their games. I may discuss that era of the series if there's a demand for it in the future, but for now, I'm going to put them on the back burner. Rule number 3, no hide-in-sight biases. Additionally, as I discuss certain details from each game, I want to remove any hindsight biases and attempt to solve each entry with the information that would have been available upon release. For example, we all know the killer to be William Afton, but didn't get a confirmation until the release of Sister Location. So if you're wondering why I'm calling him Purple Guy up to that point, that's why. I'd like to see how many changes or details a casual fan of the games can draw upon the information only provided from the games, which leads us to number 4, this is just for fun. I know there's probably hundreds of thousands of theorists that could come up with their own conclusions using the various media from the franchise. Everything discussed is just my own perspective based on the games and story presented by its sole creator. If you would like to follow along this journey, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Comment on some details and theories you come to. I'd like to see what conclusions you guys come up with by the end of this journey. And with that out of the way, I want to say thank you for watching. Let's get started with the one indie game that started it all. This is what you're greeted with when you open the game for the first time. The sudden flash of static with an anthropomorphic bear crashing out. The Sound of Urban Darkness Part 8 by Bjorn Lynn. For those of you who haven't played the game or are brand new to the series, this is Five Nights at Freddy's. It's an indie horror game developed by Scott Cawthon that picked up a bit of traction in 2014. To best understand how this game became as big as it is today, there are 2 main factors you must understand: the creator and the horror landscape. Let's start with Scott Cawthon, who is an independent Christian game developer that made some religious-based games including the Desolate Hope series and Pilgrim Quest. The success of Scott's games prior to Fnaf were nothing to write home about, with him making less than $100 a month on his passion projects, having to rely on other sources of income to support his wife and children, including retail work and some computer programming. The lowest point for him came at the launch of Chipper & Sons in November 2013, with negative reviews mocking the look of his characters, looking creepy and unsettling.
Terrifying. Utterly
The commercial failure of this game, along with the financial hardships from the 2008 recession, led Scott to a state of depression, questioning his faith in God and his purpose as an artist. As for the state of horror in 2013, games such as Slender, Amnesia, Outlast, and Dead Space were the rave for the lot of the Let's Play YouTubers. While these games alone were not bad on their own, many indie horror game creators that wanted a taste of success from such popular titles would reuse the same mechanics, storylines, themes, and tones without adding anything new or unique, especially when it came to the Amnesia Slender formula. Needless to say, the market for a fun original horror game was in desperate need for innovation. So, when you have a man with a distinctive creative style that essentially has nothing to lose, and put him in a field that is waiting for a strong pendulum swing in another direction, what could he possibly get? The answer is this game. I know that's quite a bit of setup for a game with the silly bear that jump scares you, but to understand the game series going forward, I figure it would be best to understand how we got here. I mean, the title screen alone best represents the mind of Scott after reading the reviews of Chipper & Sons. I imagine him going, "Oh yeah, you want something scary? Well, here you go."
Huh, that's odd. I thought that would be big news.
You thought what would be big news?
Upon starting a new game, you're presented with this ad in a newspaper for a company called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Not a fan of the lack of accountability for my demise, but $120 for sitting around can't be that bad. It's that bad. Our journey begins in one of the most run-down fictional offices in all of gaming, accompanied by the sounds of liminal space lights buzzing and a metal fan running constantly. The only thing to keep us company on this game is the all-seeing cupcake, Freddy's Boopoo Schnoot, and...
Hello? Hello?
This is the phone guy, voiced by Scott. And for the next few nights, his phone calls act as the only friendly voice to guide us on getting through the nights and filling us in on the ins and outs of Fazbear Entertainment. I'm not going to play all the full calls, since I'm pretty sure the majority of you watching this video have heard them plenty of times, but if you are interested, I'll be sure to link all his calls in the description. This is what we learned from the phone guy's first call. Fazbear Entertainment tends to dodge accountability at every turn. Phone Guy tends to downplay the severity of the tragedies that occur around the company. The animatronic characters move around the building and want to forcefully stuff us inside a character suit, resulting in our death. The building's power supply will exponentially drop when we utilize the doors, lights, and cameras. An incident in 1987 occurred where an animatronic character bit someone's head off, resulting in the loss in their frontal lobe. Thankfully, they survived. We learn all of this in a matter of 3.5 minutes in a new environment that's dark, unfamiliar, and houses killer animatronics on the hunt. If that's not stressful as a first-time player, you must play a lot of horror games or have nerves of steel. Thankfully, Phone Guy's call takes up half the night. The difficulty for the first night is fairly low, allowing the new players to better learn the mechanics of the game. Following his advice, you should survive easily. In fact, the only character to really activate in the night is none other than... I've decided to talk about each character per night as the week goes on, since each night compounds a new threat per night. Bonnie is a main animatronic you'll likely encounter for night 1. Surprisingly, this is the one character that Scott had nightmares about during the development of this game.
Check it out. Ah! Whoa, what's the matter?
What the hell is that? A killer robot monster? Ah!
Stewie, relax.
No, Brian, you keep that thing away from me! Is it looking at me? Can it see me?
Man, you're really scared of this thing, huh?
Ah!
The designs for all the characters in this game strike a good balance of being kid-friendly mascots that could exist alongside the likes of Showbiz or Chuck E. Cheese, but having an underlying level of sentience as if they were truly alive. More on that later. This is usually conveyed through the eyes and slightly open mouths, pondering at your mere presence. In the case of Bonnie, he tends to linger around the left side of the building until he approaches your left door. While he's on the move, sometimes you'll capture him at certain instances where he's just staring at you through the cameras, almost as if he knows he is being watched at all times.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
There isn't too much to say about this character, but he is regarded to be Freddy's best friend, the gang's guitarist, and one of the most active characters in the game. Speaking of the game, let's move on over to Night 2. As the next night begins, we are once again greeted by the phone guy.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now. I'm just stroking my...
This call is much shorter, with him mentioning some gameplay mechanics, including how the animatronics will get more aggressive as the nights go on, and to keep an eye out on the camera in Pirates Cove. But before I talk about who resides there, I'd like to discuss the visuals in this game. Everything seen in this game, and throughout a lot of the games made by Scott in the series, is a bunch of 2D images that are then rendered by a software program called ClickTeam 2.5 to basically make the images have the illusion of depth and motion. In simplest terms, everything seen in the game is still picture, and for the most part, it's done well. The animatronic characters have their own rendering process that Scott came up with, but they managed to fit well in each frame of the restaurant. The only time I think it looks just a little bit off is when you're moving the mouse from side to side while you're sitting in the office. This may be just a me issue, but it makes the office look a bit too cylindrical at times where it shouldn't. But aside from that, I must admit the game looks pretty good, even for 2025 standards, especially on the cameras. Speaking of cameras, Pirates Cove is the one cam that the phone guy makes note of due to a certain character that resides there. This character being which I must say, the name for these characters are simple and to the point. I'd argue most Fnaf fans are able to identify these characters much easier than most of Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz characters. Let me give an example. Take a moment to identify this fictional bird character. If you said Looney Bird from Showbiz, you are correct. Now identify this fictional bird character. If you said Chica the chicken from Five Nights at Freddy's, you are also correct. Finally, one last bird character. I'll give you a minute. Pause and like. If you said Helen Henny from Chuck E. Cheese, you are correct. Anyways, among the core cast of characters, Foxy is one of the more interesting animatronics. His gameplay loop requires you to keep your camera on him to prevent him from visiting you in your office. He has multiple stages of exiting his cove before leaving the curtains wide open and making a run towards your office and the neighboring camera. If you manage to close your door in time, you can stop him from coming in at the cost of 1% of power. Now that wouldn't be so bad if he did it once, but the second he goes back to Pirates Cove, the cycle begins to repeat. And each time he comes to your door, the power cost increases by an additional 5%, meaning if he visits your office 6 times in one night, you could lose 21% in an instant. Foxy requires your attention and will punish you if you ignore him for too long. Outside of his mechanics, I think the Fox is pretty cool. Among the core cast, he tends to stick out for being the most erratic and always being aware of the player's surveillance. As the only character to appear out of service, making the player question why he is left in this state. I think he's the most popular character from this game. So popular, in fact, Pyrocynical used him as his own avatar for quite some time. And if you're watching this Pyrocynical, please let me do some voice work on your next main channel video. I would do an absolute amazing job. Please, I'll do it for free. All in all, a solid character, but I'm ready for things to get real tonight. Night 3, another phone call.
Why do I see you trying to impress Freddy? You're looking up things like how to impress Freddy on our first date?
Phone guy doesn't really provide any new information, but mentions going dead, so the animatronics think that you're an empty costume, but then shuts down that idea at the thought of an endoskeleton being shoved inside a person. It's an odd thought that's got me thinking about the nature of these killer mascots. If they're so concerned with whatever the rules are, why haven't they stuffed the endo in the parts and service room? Sounds suspicious. Speaking of sounds, let's talk about the audio. The sounds in this game create an uneasy atmosphere to the establishment, and personally, I'm all for it. Everything from the footsteps of the animatronics to the strange circus-themed music that makes this restaurant feel alive when you know damn well it should be quiet on the night shift. In fact, there's only one camera that's located in the kitchen that has only an audio feed. Realistically, there's no reason to check up on it, but sometimes I wonder what's going on in there. It's the little things in this game that keeps the player submerged in this unsettling environment. The one thing that can ruin this immersion, though, is the jump scares. If you do meet your untimely demise, the game ends with you being jump scared by Freddy and his friends. If they make it past your door, the mascots will wait for you to interact with your camera, getting the jump on you. If you run out of power, the main man will slowly make his way to your left side, play a little song, and then get the jump on you. I think the jump scares in this game are fine. Logically speaking, it makes sense that these killer mascots would be the last thing you'd see before getting forcefully stuffed. The issue I have is that they tend to lose their shock value the more you fail at this game. Furthermore, I think their inclusion in this game tends to break the near masterful immersion Scott spent so much time setting up. Rather than being scared by Bonnie or Chica, I find myself disappointed about having my night cut short. Foxy is the worst example of this, having him just pop out through the side door checking in on you, which led to many believing that he was a good guy for checking in on your office. Outside of Foxy's, the main three animatronics animations for their respective scares are very well animated, but annoying to have at the end of a bad run. Speaking of animatronics, let's talk about... Her mechanics are nearly identical to Bonnie's, where she'll just wander around the building until she finds her way to your office, only she hangs around the right side of the building. Chica is also the one character associated with food in this game, from her iconic "Let's Eat" bib to her digging around the kitchen. I have a personal theory that she's trying to find the cupcake that's been sitting in her office, and ultimately punishes you for stealing her most sacred item if she makes it to your office. Overall, she's terrifying as heck, and fits in right into the cast of Freddy's, but much like Bonnie, she doesn't have too much of her character apart from her gimmicks. Another night, another call. It's at this point the dread begins to kick up to 11. How are we expected to make it through 5 nights of hell while some guy who arguably has more experience with these matters kicks the bucket on night 4? Things are looking grim. I'm starting to think there's more to Freddy's than meets the eye. Throughout the last few nights, you probably noticed the strange things occur during the nights. Posters changing across the hall, the sudden flashing of Freddy and Bonnie linked to our head, and the constant messaging of the phrase, "It's me." At the very least, I'm convinced the building is haunted. It would explain the nature of the quote-unquote kid-friendly mascots, and how they purposely seek to hunt us down at every possible moment. With Fazbear Entertainment being disingenuous and having all these measures in place to effectively turn a blind eye to the death of a loyal employee, it's safe to assume something horrible has happened in this restaurant before. But before we dive into that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, the only, the only, 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 only. For a franchise that would later focus on other characters in future installments, I'm shocked at how many people forget how perfect Freddy is as the game's final boss in the century. Though he may be the last one to get off stage, his mechanics are fairly straightforward. He has a linear path that he will take every time and will move more frequently when you are not on camera, much like Foxy. What separates Freddy from the rest of his friends is the bear won't backtrack to his stage. Once he makes his way to your office, he'll camp right outside of your right door, making him one of the most punishing characters in the game. A good way to track his movements is by identifying his ominous laughs. Occasionally, you'll also hear him practicing his music box in the kitchen, as if he's preparing for you to fail the night. I know I've already talked about the jump scares in the past night, but I think Freddy's is one of the two characters that stand out in an impactful way. If he catches you on your right side, his eyes completely blacken, almost if he were possessed by an angry spirit. And if you run out of power, he goes out of his way to put on a show right before ending your run. The piece Freddy plays is part of the Les Toreros from Carmen Suite No. 1, which is an orchestral piece made by George Bizet in 1875. Fun fact, the song is the last piece of the first suite and is used to transition to the second one. This may or may not have been Scott's intention, but I interpret Freddy's use of Les Toreros as him preparing the player to transition from life to death. The time it takes from Freddy to kill you in this manner is completely RNG based. It can take anywhere from mere seconds to well over a minute. Among the entire cast, I think Freddy is probably the most terrifying, with Chica as a close second. The way he moves around in darkness and challenges the player's patience really sets him up as a real threat. If there's one thing that bums me out, is that this is the first and likely the last time we'll see Freddy in this light. I'm hoping someone at Steel Wool feels the same way and will make a game that has Freddy back as a central threat. After all, his name is in the games. I'm sure fans will eat it up if they do it right. Well guys, we did it. We've made it to night 5, somehow. That's strange. The garbled up call we received on night 5 was an altered passage from the autobiography of a yogi. No, not that yogi. The book came out in 1946 and follows the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, who goes on this journey of discovery on meditation. The book delves into topics of spiritualism and religion, receiving much praise as one of the top 100 books of the century for theology. But what does that have to do with the bear game? Well, the passage Scott used was from Chapter 8, covering the exchange between Yogananda and the botanist J.C. Bose, who studied the relationship between organic and inorganic matter. Bose led the study for plant stimuli, believing that plant life is no different than the life of animals, being able to experience pain, pleasure, love, hate, joy, fear, and so on. He would then use his findings in plants and conduct similar experiments with metal, with the idea that inorganic matters such as metal possess a life force that can not only be prone to decay, but in fact can be brought back to life. I'm pretty sure this is Scott's way of telling the player, these characters are not only alive, but experience a level of torment, fear, anger, and despair that is no different than ourselves. With this in mind, we have one last animatronic to discuss. This is Yellow Bear, or more widely regarded by fans as Golden Freddy. While he's appearing to be relegated as a spooky Easter egg with an approximate 1.5% chance of spawning on each night, I would argue that he has the most impact in this game, more than any other animatronic. The strange paranormal activity with posters being replaced, the phrase "It's me" being written across various areas, Golden Freddy has been the one altering things around the restaurant, with his official summoning coming from the poster in the left hall outside our door. In fact, if you did have your door up while looking at his poster, he can bypass your security and appear in front of you slumped over, appearing as an empty costume. A call back to Phone Guy's Night 3 call. While he is in front of you, in this state, You are subject to those Freddy and Bonnie flashes with a lot of "it's me's" appearing. The only way to ward them off is to toggle your monitor, otherwise your game crashes with this scream. Most fans may find his jump scare to be quite underwhelming, but I disagree. The way I interpret his takeover of our game goes hand in hand with the way he has taken over the restaurant. It's safe to say, while it's rare to see him in action, he has been with us since night one, acting as an unseen presence while leading the charge on killing anyone that sits in the office. But why? Why hunt us? Why kill the phone guy? What's driving Golden Freddy on his pursuit of vengeance? The one other thing that can appear in the right hall outside of your office is a series of news articles that tell the tragedy that hit this restaurant. Kids vanish at local pizzeria, bodies not found. 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26th. While video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning, the children themselves were never found and presumed dead. Police think that the suspect dressed as a company mascot to earn the children's trust. Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Local pizzeria, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, has been threatened again with shutdown by the health department over reports of foul odor coming from much-loved animal mascots. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. 5 children now reported missing, suspect convicted. 5 children are now linked to the incident at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. While the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle ever since to convince families to return to the pizzeria. It's a tragedy. Local pizzeria is said to close by year's end. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that took place there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will close its doors by year-end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on in the hearts of the kids. The characters will live on, CEO says. These articles have a 4% chance of appearing every time you toggle your monitor, and can easily be overlooked due to the amount of stress and enemies the game throws at you. But before we put the pieces together, let's grab our paycheck and be on our way. Are you serious?
Pops, where have you guys been?
We were hiding in the armor closet, then suddenly we were in the stock room at Shoe Farm.
Good thing it was worth it. 7 bones, baby.
$7? We almost died for $7!
The numbers aren't important.
It was the principal.
After we complete the work week, we unlock a chance to get some overtime. There are no new calls or anything of the sorts, but more of a challenge to get some extra money. If you manage to complete Night 6, you unlock Custom Night, which allows you to play with each character with their AI levels set between 1 to 20. If you input the following numbers 1987, you get this. Interesting. If you complete a run of Custom Night, Fazbear Entertainment fires you for the pettiest reasons known to man. And that's 5 Nights at Freddy's. With the game complete, I think we could finally put the pieces together for our foundation for the timeline. To properly build this timeline, I think it's best to start with the one event that will act as our anchor point for the rest of the evidence we have, which is none other than the bite of 87. As stated by the phone guy, this was an event that occurred where an animatronic attacked a person, resulting in permanent brain damage for the victim. and confining the animatronics to only moving off stage at night. You can make a good case for any of the 5 mascots for being guilty of this event, but the 2 most plausible suspects that stick out to me would be Foxy and Golden Freddy. Unlike the others, both seem to be isolated from the core cast, with Foxy being out of service for God knows how long, and Golden Freddy being relegated to nothing more than an empty shell of his former self. And while Foxy's enigmatic behavior and more dangerous design would support the idea of him being the prime suspect, I think the way the game presents Golden Freddy makes a better candidate for the infamous bite from our narrative stance. Among the cast, he's presented as the most aggressive, going as far as to crash your game out at any chance you encounter him. This, combined with the Easter eggs Scott intentionally added in an update with Custom Night's 1987 mode triggering Golden Freddy, seems to entertain the idea that the character was involved in a horrific incident that occurred within that year. This may explain his lack of physical presence in the game. Fazbear Entertainment has presented itself as a company that would go to the distance to protect its public image, even at the cost of the lives of staff. It's likely to conclude that they went to many ends to remove the character from the eyes of the masses to avoid any further bad PR. This may also explain why he isn't a playable character in Custom Night. By the time we join Fazbear Entertainment, Golden Freddy has effectively been wiped from the company's history. And with all this in mind, I think it's safe to say that the infamous Yellow Bear is our culprit for now. I'll keep Foxy and any other character in mind as we discuss later titles, as those games may present new evidence that adds to a different perspective. But in the case of the first game, Golden Freddy is guilty of the bite of 87. From this point, I think it's best to move to the present, which at the very least we know takes place after the bite. Using the paycheck we get at the end of Night 5, we learn a few key details. First, the person we're playing as is named Mike Schmidt. Though many games will later explain why Mike would willingly come back to a place that would harbor killer mascots with no real reward, in the context of this game, he's a blank slate for players to fill in the gaps. The 2 ideas that come to me as to why he would return would come from his desperation for money, or he's seeking the same answers we are regarding the fall of Freddy's. We also learn the time we get paid is on the 12th of November, but the year is marked out. Crunching the numbers, the rate at which Mike is getting paid is set at a whopping $4 an hour. By today's standards, that's ridiculous, but by looking up the federal minimum wages over the years, we can determine the likely years we work at Freddy's are between 1991 and 1995 at a rate of $4.25 an hour, with 1990 as an honorable mention at a rate of $3.80 an hour. Now I know some of you may be wondering why I didn't bother listing 88 or 89 as viable options, and the main reason for that boils down to, number 1, Fazbear Entertainment doesn't really care about their staff enough to grant them fair pay for their work conditions, and number 2, the phrasing of the bite of 87 from Phone Guy implies there had been a significant passage of time since that incident. It would be odd to put a strong emphasis on the year for something if it happened oh so recently. Speaking of the Phone Guy, let's talk about his demise. I find it funny that in the greater Fnaf community, Phone Guy's death isn't really discussed outside of that one book. This may be because his last calls suggest that the entire cast played a part in his early retirement, and while most may find that answer to be satisfactory, personally, I think we can determine who did the deed. Listening to the call, we can hear that there is banging on one of the security doors. Based on this, we can automatically eliminate Bonnie and Foxy. The only other time we get the sound of banging is when Foxy comes charging down the left hall, and since the left door is shut, that takes Bonnie off the list too, which leaves us to Freddy, Chica, and Golden Freddy. We can knock Freddy off the list due to the usage of his music box. The only time we see him perform his song is in the dark. If the Phone Guy can record his last moments with one of the doors down, this would imply the building still has some level of power, and the only other place where Freddy could play his tunes with the power on is in the kitchen, thus leaving us with Chica and Golden Freddy. Now I'm not gonna lie to you, we don't have a good way to determine whether Phone Guy has the right door down or not, so from this point forward, we're going to do a little bit of speculation. If the Phone Guy has both doors fully shut, then that would make Golden Freddy the culprit, probably killing him by scrambling his brains with his mere existence. But if there's a chance that he has his right door open, I think the edge goes to Chica, and the reason I say this ultimately comes down to how Golden Freddy works in Fnaf 1. See, Golden Freddy operates in a ghostly manner throughout the game. As we discussed earlier, he is able to do things like alter posters, overwhelm our senses, and even phase through the steel doors in the office. And although he's presented with all this fantastical power, his true hindrance that keeps him from being an absolute threat is being able to do anything physical in the real world. I mean, think about it. Fazbear Entertainment went through all this trouble through decommissioning the animatronic for one reason or another, which would limit him to a lifeless state. This is why he always appears so limp and lifeless whenever he arrives at your office, and why his jump scare is so static. He can't physically hurt you, even if he were truly in the face of the acting guard. In order to carry out his quest of vengeance, he plays into his strength and the paranormal influence to use other characters to fulfill his vendetta, which is why I believe that Chica was the one to deliver the killing blow, despite the fact that the last thing we hear is Golden Freddy's scream. This is more or less a command call, I would assume, but that's just speculation yet again. The final piece to fit in this timeline is the news articles found in the right hall. I believe the publishing order for these articles would start with kids vanishing, which is the only news piece that provides a date, with the night of June 26 being our prime start time, and has a victim count of 2. The next entry would be sanitation article, and honestly, I believe this one may be interchangeable with kids vanished. The main reason I believe that this published news piece is interchangeable comes down to how the investigation plays out. The initial surveillance that led to the killer's capture involved his last 2 victims. In another news piece, we learned that the total victim count was raised to 5, meaning that there are 3 children that were also unaccounted for and last seen at Freddy's prior to his arrest. It also never sits right with me that the police supposedly searched the restaurant, leaving no stone unturned, except for the infamously stinky animatronics, only for the animatronics to begin bleeding and smelling sometime later once the investigation closes. I believe the police did examine the animatronics, but couldn't find anything tangible outside of a vague bad smell, and the reasoning for that would ultimately come down to the entity that is Fazbear Entertainment. I mean, hear me out. If the killer was the one to hide the children within the animatronics and was promptly arrested the following morning, how could he have moved the bodies to get away with the crime? The answer is simple. He didn't cover his tracks, but the company did. And granted, it wasn't to protect their staff or anything like that. They removed the bodies and cleaned up the animatronics to protect the image of their company, a company that was already threatened with shutdown due to the numerous health code violations. Their decision in tampering with the investigation is what ultimately led to the next document, the Suspect Convicted article. Though the title of this newspaper would have many to believe that the perpetrator was found guilty in a court of law, the way that it is written seems to suggest that he was rather detained by law enforcement for a period of time, but was ultimately released due to the children never being found, in part thanks to Fazbear Entertainment's intervention, thus marking this dark point in the company as the infamous Missing Children's Incident, or the MCI. Despite their attempts to distance themselves from this dark chapter, the final newspaper claims that the restaurant is forced to shut down by the end of the year. The unresolved case that loomed over Freddy slowly poisoned the reputation Fazbear Entertainment sought to keep clean. If they had properly collaborated with law enforcement instead of thoroughly cleaning and bleaching the premises, perhaps the company would have moved on into the future. Instead, much like Freddy and his friends, the restaurant will forever be haunted by the sins of their past. And that's it. That's the FNAF 1 timeline presented on the screen. Other games would go on to add more events and details, but as far as we stand now, this would make a good stopping point. Before I end this lore/retrospective video, I'd like to talk about the legacy this game had left behind. Obviously, Scott Cawthon became a household name in the indie horror community, turning a huge profit, and would immediately get to work on building a whole franchise from the commercial success of the first game. Outside of Scott, there are two main groups of people that would grow from the success of Five Nights at Freddy's. The first would be the Let's Play community, which would include the likes of Markiplier, PewDiePie, Corey Kenshin, Jacksepticeye, and many others I could talk about. It's not just those who had played it on release. In fact, there are many channels that have played it just within this year to cultivate a little bit of views, such as Flats, Queso, and Pyrocynical. I swear, if I had a nickel every time I mentioned Pyrocynical, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice in one video. The second group of people that would benefit from the success of Five Nights at Freddy's would be the lore divers. This part of the community would scrub every part of the game to make sense of the events that took place throughout the series. Unwithered Truth, Gibi, T-Dreads, Dako, Ritos. I could go on, but there would be way too many channels to list with however long this video would be. The main man who would lead the charge in finding everything out about these games would be Matthew Patrick, aka Game Theory. In fact, Game Theory was my introduction to the series, with his first theory being that Mike Schmidt was the killer and we are forced to come back every night as some sort of sentence for our sins. While the way Matt goes about presenting the theory really wasn't good for, well, obvious reasons, it did garner a lot of attention, with many people bringing their own perspective and interpretations to the table. Even today, some channels can pick up traction out of the gate, with dual process theory being the latest example with their Golden Freddy video. And while I am singing this game's praises, there is one thing that follows the legacy of Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's the rise of the mascot horror genre. I don't put the full blame on Scott for opening Pandora's box of horror games, since it was only a matter of time before someone brought a new title that would shake the indie horror community in some capacity. However, the number of games made in the past decade that had some kind of fictional character that was intended for children, that goes evil and has some convoluted history and lame jump scares, is a little too frequent. There's a reason why most mascot horrors fail at replicating Cawthon's formula, and the key ingredient is risk. What's the point in taking other people's ideas if you're not going to change anything under the surface? Scott Cawthon was just a man who made a game with a story that he wanted to tell. If you look at his catalog, he struck out way too many times before he knocked it out of the park. I'll close off with this thought. If you really want people to resonate with your work, whether it's a story, game, video, or some other project, don't be afraid to make it your own. And if your project fails horribly, change it up. Try again. Just because you made something nobody will really care about doesn't mean you can't make something everybody will eventually love. If you managed to stick around to the end of this video, I just want to say thank you. Please do like, share, and subscribe if you really enjoyed it. This video did take quite a while to make, a little longer than I expected, especially with this being my first time with video editing and whatnot. By the time I have this video up, I should already have the second game in the series under development. I would definitely like to have all of the games knocked out before the launch of the movie in December. But outside of Five Nights at Freddy's, I do have a couple ideas for independent videos coming soon to a channel near you. But once again, thank you for watching. I'm gonna go grab me a good night's rest. Sweet dreams.